Hi, thanks for joining me as I take you on a quick tour of Visage version 8. If you haven't used Visage before, one of the first questions you'll probably ask is, how do you log on to the system? How do you actually get in to do useful work? And that's simple. You'll typically have an icon on your desktop. Simply double click that. You'll be presented with a logon screen. The logon screen itself, you'll notice, already has a username plugged in. I'll just use my mouse and highlight it there. And it's got the right name. The reason for that is because when my Visage user was set up, I associated that with my Windows user credentials. When I first logged on this morning, I logged on to Windows, and using that information, Visage was able to determine that I probably wanted to log on as the user Ross, which is correct. So I'll just move down to the password field. Now, I suppose the first lesson in this is to move between fields. If you're coming from a background of using AccuTerm or a character-based system, you can use the Enter button. If you're coming from a background of using Windows, you'd be more familiar with using the Tab button, and you can use the Tab button as well. By and large, they're both interchangeable. You'll also notice that the field that I'm on, as well as having this little flashing I-beam associated with it, also has a blue highlight around the field itself. If I just click back on username, you'll see that highlight is there. And that's simply so that you can quickly see or determine whereabouts on the screen you're up to, what the computer is expecting you to be entering next. And of course, if you want to enter information into another field, you can just use your mouse to click anywhere you like on the screen. But in terms of logging on, I'll put my password in. Now to log on, you have two options. At this stage, you can either use the Enter button, and it must be the Enter button. If you hit Tab, you'll just go back up to the user field like that. So if I use my Enter button here, I had a logon failure, and the reason for that is I didn't put my right password in. You'll also notice, if I just move this out of the way, or I'll remind you that as you're typing, you don't actually see the password going in. You just see that blanked out, as you'd expect. Now, the other way you can log on is to simply use your mouse and click on this button here, which is what I'll do now. And I'm now logged onto the system, which is presenting me with a menu that's customized just for me. I only get to see the things that I'm allowed to have access to. Now, I'll just make this screen a little larger by using the Maximize button from Windows. And in case you're wondering, if you haven't seen it before, I'm using Windows 8.1 on my desktop at the moment. Now, a couple of things about the screens generally. You'll notice at the moment that there's actually a little flashing I-beam up here and that blue highlight around this box. It's what we call a quick access box. And that's because I can type in the name of any program on the system into this quick access box, and I'll be taken straight to that program. And if you don't know what the names of all the programs are, as you probably won't, there's a drop down here. And of course, because I'm a master user, I've got access to a couple of thousand menu items, so I'm probably not going to remember them all. But that's what the quick access bar is about. If we move to the other end of the screen on this line, you'll see that I have a number of icons up here. As I move my mouse over each of them, it comes up with some descriptive help text about what each of those buttons do. And that's our toolbar. The tools will actually change depending on where you are in the system and what you can actually do. The one on the extreme right is a help button. Now, if you click that, you can basically either send us an email or you can also request support. If you request support, we're automatically going to fire off a TeamViewer session for you, and that will actually allow us to jump straight onto your computer system. If you say you want to log a support email, you can just type in the text that you want to send, maybe a picture of the current screen that's up at the moment, and that email will be sent directly through to us. So you have two ways of getting help if you need to, technical support from Stamina. We may, if we aren't hooked up to your system with TeamViewer, from time to time ask you to clear cache, which is this little clear cache button on the end. The help button is hopefully reasonably obvious. That will call up an online manual for you. And if you're used to Windows at all, this format will be reasonably familiar to you. Basically what it is, the little books here that open as I click on them actually mimic the menu system that I have access to. So as I go into each of these things, the system will give me some context-sensitive help about, in this case, the individual fields within a program. There's also a search facility. And of course, if you want, you can also just drag that out to give yourself some more room on the left-hand side. But in terms of the search facility, if you put in a word like customer and hit search, we'll go and find all of the references within the help system to the word customer, of which there are a total of 652. Now, the help works a little bit differently than you may expect if you put in multiple words. If I put in customer and customers, for example, I'm expecting I'll probably end up with a different number to what I had previously. In terms of total things, oh no, it's the same one. And if I put in debtor maybe as well, basically rather than finding help items that refer to only those that contain, in this case, all three words, the results are actually being returned, so it's giving me results that refer to any one of the words that I enter up. And that's because there may be alternate terms: customer, customers, plural, debtor, debtors, plural. So the idea is you can put in any words, and the help system will bring back information about those for you. Any help item in the system that actually has any of these words that you've entered up. You can minimize that help text if you want to keep it down at the bottom of the screen, maximize it, or what I'm going to do now, I don't need help, I'll physically just close that down. So that's the toolbar as accessed from the menu system. You'll also notice up in the top here is a little banner that will basically just tell you the name of the program you're using. So you're using Stamina R5 application version 2014.1. Over on the left hand side here you'll see that there is an icon, and this icon will be different for your company than it is for ours. And if you have multiple branches, this is the area, or multiple divisions, cost centers, companies, call them what you will, this is the area where you can actually change entities. You've got two ways of changing entities. The first, with your mouse, is to simply right click on this icon, unless you're left-handed and have your mouse configured, in which case it'd be a left click, but I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use a right click for my designation for that. So if I right click on this, I get a list of all of the entities or companies that I'm allowed to get access to. I'll go into, say, the Australian Stockhorse Society, which isn't, because it's actually going to be King's Engineering, a different company. You'll see that the colour scheme has changed, and the menu itself has changed somewhat as well in terms of what I can physically get access to. So one way that I can change entities is by right-clicking on that logo and selecting the company or entity I'd like to get to. The other way is to use this little area here, which actually has the name of the company I'm currently in, which also appears right up on the top center of the screen here. I'm in my Newcastle test entity at the moment. And in brackets it tells me that I'm connected to a computer system called VQA. It's not important, but the important thing is that front and center on the top of your screen is the name of the entity that you're plugged into. So as I said, we can click on here and get that same pop-up list to be able to choose which entity we wish to work in. You'll also notice there's a favorites bar across here on the left hand side. Now this area that we use over on the left hand side, we typically refer to that as your navigation bar or nav bar. It's a way that you move around between programs, and once you're actually in a program, as we'll see shortly, between screens. Um, the other major functional area of the system is this blue bar down the bottom, although once more, if I was in a different entity, it may be a different color. But this is the action bar. This is where I typically have buttons that allow me to do things. For example, I'm now going to navigate into my general ledger system, and I do that by simply clicking on the icon. And I can now select, say, maintenance functions by once more clicking on it. And from here, I may decide that I love my general ledger so much, I'd like to be able to jump to account categories very quickly whenever I wanted to. So to add something to my favorites menu, simply navigate to the program through the menus, then right click on it in the menu structure, and once more you get a context menu that pops up. One of the options says add to favorites, so if I click that, I now have my account categories added over here to my favorites menu. Now what this allows you to do is customize the menu system or your favorites to suit you precisely. You'll also notice as I've moved through the menu system, or you may not have noticed, but you will now that I pointed out, that I started off at the master menu, I went into general ledger, then I went into maintenance. And you can actually see this path that I've followed. And with your mouse, you can actually click at any one of these levels to get back to that particular menu. So if I wanted to get back to my main general ledger menu, two ways to do it. One, I can click the exit button, which will take me back one level. The other thing I can do, if I just go back into maintenance, would be to come up to this level here at general ledger, or maybe I want to go back to my main master menu and simply click on that in the title bar, and I'm now back to my main menu itself. This area of the screen in the middle is what we affectionately refer to as the guts. It's where things happen. It's where windows are displayed, menus are displayed, and programs are going to display information for you as well. Now, looking at this menu, you may not like that particular style or presentation, and that's okay. If I come back up to my Tools button, I'm going to select the option that says Change User Settings, which we haven't looked at. And this allows me, amongst other things, to change the style of the menu that I'm presented. Now at the moment, I'm using what is known as a button menu. It basically, well, you've seen the way that it works, it's a little button. I have some other styles that I can use. I could have a tree menu. If you notice over here, it shows you roughly what a tree menu would look like on the screen. You can select a horizontal menu, what I'd call a traditional Windows popping out menu. And with that, you can also get to select whether each of these menu items should open only when you click, or possibly when you put your mouse over it, or maybe either of those. I rarely use only open for mouse over, and I'll show you why. The menu system will change, and as I move my mouse, it will automatically go and open these things up for me. Now that's potentially good and potentially bad, simply because if I accidentally move my mouse over here, suddenly the menu has changed. So if I was setting this up for myself using one of those horizontal menus, I would always check this so it says only open for click, and what that means is I can hover over this and it doesn't open the menu until I physically click the button to go and open the menu. Now the other menu style that you have, if you've used or seen Windows 8, they have a thing called a modern user interface. They were going to call it Metro until they got sued, which presents menus as tiles, and we call it a tiled menu structure. So if you want to do a Windows 8 style menu, you can do so. And if you happen to have a touch screen, this is very good because it gives you a nice big area that you can actually just go in and click on. Now other things you can change in here, and I should point out, you may lose some of these tool buttons. People may decide that they don't want you to go in and make these changes, but I would suggest that everyone within your organisation has their menus set up exactly the same way, and that's simply so that when you're talking amongst yourselves, you're all speaking the same language. If someone has a tree menu and someone has a horizontal menu and someone else is using tiles, if someone says, oh, it's the third menu item, is that the third across, the third down? Anyway, you would normally have everyone using exactly the same menu structure. Other things you can do or change on these user settings is adjust your user interface, whether you use a thing called process flow tabbing. You would normally have that ticked. It basically just means that as you move through the program, it naturally follows you. Whether you want to show the shortcut box or not, that was that quick access box up here. Whether you want to allow zooms, I'll show you what that means. Whether you want to show a date and time on the screen. If you notice down on the bottom of the screen here, above my Windows taskbar, I have a Visage area which has a date and time on it. You'll see the time is merrily ticking over there. It also tells me who I'm physically logged on as. And at the moment it's saying executing a script. I'll show you what happens in this area as we move through a program. You'll actually see that it will change and give you a quick one-line help for the field or the question you're being asked at the moment. So it's sort of an inline prompting type thing. You also have options as to whether you would like the system to show confirmation messages. If you go and try and delete a record, do you want the system to ask you, are you sure you want to delete it? Or if you want to remove a row from a table, for example, down on the bottom section of the screen here, we have a table that shows me all of my favorite items. You'll notice the first thing up here is invoices, and here it is there. Now if I wanted to remove invoices from my favorites, I could simply click on that line and click this red X which says delete a row, and because I have my show confirmation messages for row deletes on, it says, are you sure you want to delete it? Yes please. It's disappeared from here. It won't disappear from my favorites menu until or unless I hit the save button. Whilst we're looking at the table, these little controls here should hopefully be somewhat obvious. This one here will take you to the next page of entries. This will take you back a page. This will take you to the very last page. That will take you to the very first page. Or alternatively, if you wanted to go specifically to page 4, you'll notice that little number 1 is in red and it has an underscore which you may not be able to see particularly well, but you can click on that and put in any page number you want, say number 4, and it will take you to that page. If you had a display with a couple of thousand entries in it, you might want to get to around page 200 or something similar to save yourself some time. Or you can go directly to an individual row number as well if you happen to know that. But that's what these messages here are for. You'll also notice up on the top here, hidden, you have the option to put a new password in. So if you want to change your password that's used for Visage logons, it doesn't have to be the same as your Windows password, and indeed probably won't be the same. But you as a user can change your own password here. You also have a number of miscellaneous things. Do you want to disable the big X up in the top right hand corner here to be able to close a window or not? Do you want to automatically select text? Now at the moment that's selected, and I'll show you what the impact of that is later. If you happen to do a search, do you want to go to the next field after you return, or do you want to stay on that field? And also whether you want to enable dragging and dropping of menus, and that's primarily in this favorites area, not the main guts itself. And I also have my screen set up to automatically scale the program. At the moment I'm using a full HD screen, so that's 1980 pixels across by 1080 pixels down. If you happened to be using a screen that didn't have that many pixels, with the auto scaling set, it would automatically condense down so you would see the screen correctly, though smaller, without scroll bars. If you had that turned off, you would just see a portion of the screen and you would be scrolling around. But that shouldn't be an issue, I would hope for you. Anyway, if I save this, let me think, did I go and this is where I got rid of my invoices out of the favorites menu. So if I just hit save at this point in time, I'm back to my menu. You'll notice that invoices has now disappeared from favourites, and that simply allows you to go and manage that section of the screen to your heart's content in terms of your favourites. Now, if we go to one of my other favourites, account categories, because I love my general ledger, I'll show you some of these other things happening. If you notice at the moment, I've got my blue highlight and the flashing I-beam on this category code. If I leave my mouse over it, I get a little pop-up that tells me what sort of information I can or should be entering into that field. And it says this code is used to uniquely identify blah blah blah. That same information is actually appearing down here on this status bar I told you about before. You can put your mouse over any field and it will give you that little one-liner help text associated with it. Whereas if you called up the help and look at my toolbar, it's changed. I've got a whole lot of different entries here, but the help button is still the same. So if I went into help now, it will bring up help specifically on the field that I'm actually on the screen, and I can go and call up more help rather than just that one line type stuff on any one of these things. And if this particular page was something useful for me, you could hit the print button and go and get a hard copy of it, or alternatively, if you were putting this together in a user document, you could just come and highlight it. Now to highlight it, it's just standard Windows stuff. I put my mouse where I want to start, left click and drag, and it will highlight. Then once it's highlighted, right click on it and say copy, and I could now go and paste that somewhere as well. But I don't want to do any of those things. I do want to explain what these new toolbar items are. Now keep your eye on these first three buttons here. At the moment you'll see we've got a left arrow, a magnifying glass, and a right arrow. If I click on the description field, you'll see that those two buttons, whilst they're still there, are now dim. And that means that they're no longer active. Now, the reason for that is a category code is something that you can search on. And that's what the little magnifying glass would enable me to do. I can go and search. So if I didn't know a category, I could click the search button. By default, it's going to show this same list of 141 things from over here, but if I put in, say, admin as a word, or adme, or I might as well put the N in there, and then hit the search button. Now you'll notice, like my full screen, this little pop-up screen that's appeared has got an action bar on it with buttons that do things. So I've put in the fact here that I'm only interested in categories that have admin in them somewhere. When I click search, the screen adjusts so that I only see the things that I'm after. So that's the search screen in action, so to speak. And if I was really interested in these administration overheads, you'll notice once more it's red, it has an underscore on it. I can just click on that and it will return that back to the program for me automatically. You'll also notice that it's taken me not to the category field, but it's moved me on to the next field, being description. And further, you'll notice that that description field, currently everything is highlighted. So if I started typing, I'll lose whatever's there. Now, both of those things were controlled by my user settings. You may recall that back here on the miscellaneous area, I had ticked auto text select. So that means when I go into a field, the system will automatically have it highlighted for me. So if I start to type something, it will overtype whatever's there. If you think that's a bit dangerous, turn it off. Likewise, as I pointed out, when I returned from my search screen, you recall I searched on category, but when I came back I was on description. That's because I said I want to go to my next field after I come back from a search. If you wanted to stay on the field, untick it. So if we just save that, I now have my new things in operation. Now, on the category field, which we saw had a search facility, I also have these forward and back buttons. And if you leave your mouse over them, you can see that it says move forward a record and move back a record. So it's not surprising that if I click this, keeping your eyes, well, here I've got a situation that's useful. It said I've changed some information I'm about to move off this record, and if I click OK, the things that I've changed won't be saved. That's actually exactly what I want to happen in this case. I don't want to save that information. But the system is alerting you to the fact that if you do this, whatever this happens to be, maybe it's hitting the exit button, maybe it's going backwards or forwards for a record, that the information you've changed you're going to lose. And for me, that's fine. So it's now taking me back one record to 22 to 20 and so forth. And likewise I can move forward to get back to where I was, and of course that description is still exactly where it was. Because this is a key field, or a field that is an important part of a file, that's why these first three buttons, to go forward or back a record or to search, are highlighted. Description is just straight textual information. It's not being validated anywhere. There is no lookup associated for it, and that's why those fields are redundant at that point in time. They're still left on the screen because we don't want that little toolbar to be getting longer and shorter and so forth when you're in a program, although you will notice that it's longer when I'm in a program than when I was in a menu, because these functions here of moving backwards and forwards a record, or maybe calling up a calculator, 78 times 6 equals, and if I wanted to return that result to the program I was on, I'd just hit return, otherwise exit out. Likewise, we have a calendar here, which allows me to go and select dates, select months, select years, and once more I can highlight a date, and if I wanted to return a date I would hit return. If I just wanted to look at something I'd hit exit, and that's all I want to do at this point in time. But the first three buttons for database navigation aren't active unless it's a database field. Now I showed you how you can call up help using that little magnifying glass. Not help, how you can actually search. Another way you can search is on the field itself. If you once more right click with your mouse, you get a context menu coming up giving you options to search. So to call up my search screen, I can right click on a field, click search, and I'm up to that exact same search screen that I had before. The third way I can call up a search screen is actually to use a keyboard sequence. And in this case I have my search screen set up to function key 3, which is the same as search in Microsoft Word and so forth. So if you hit function key 3, the same search screen comes up on the screen for you. With a keyboard sequence. Now you'll also notice on my right click option here you have options to paste information, select everything. You can access the help system from here. You can also access the a maintenance function. Now that's useless for category codes because we're actually maintaining those at the moment, but this group area, if I wanted to go to the maintenance process for those, and I don't know what the name of the process is, I can just right click on that, go to maintain, and instantly I'm in the maintenance process for category groups in General Ledger. Now if you cast your eyes to the left hand side to this navigation area, you'll also see that it has the name of the program here for me. And the name of the maintenance program for General Ledger category groups is GLM. The first two characters indicate the system. GL for a General Ledger, M for maintenance. If it was a transaction, that would be a T. If it was an inquiry, it would be an E. R for report, O for other functions, and then a meaningful suffix to that in terms of what it is you're actually, in this case, maintaining. While I'm here on this screen, you'll also note that the table itself, I have these buttons here to navigate through that. You also have a slider, so you can slide up and down through those things as well. You have an option also here. One of the options you can do is a print. If you hit print with a record selected, it'll just print that one record out for you. If I say new, which is really clear everything off the screen, I want to enter some new information, or in my case, if I hit print now, I have an option of printing this report to the screen or a printer. I could fax it, email it. But I'm quite happy to take the defaults, which is show this report to the screen as a Acrobat document or as a PDF, but I could also shoot it out as a text document or an Excel spreadsheet. But if I just get this up onto the screen as a PDF, it'll go and generate it, drop it, and there's my report on screen. And once more, as I'm now in Adobe, I could go and save that and do whatever else I wanted to. But you'll find that most of the reports that you do in the system, you're going to have those sort of options in terms of deciding whereabouts they will physically be sent. Now you'll notice here once more, I'm currently in that group process, but I was previously in my category maintenance, which is actually the next bar above. So if I click on that category bar, what will happen is my screen will change. I'm back to my category maintenance, and if you look down on the bottom of the screen here, you'll see that that's where that other process was, and it's still there. If I want to go back to group maintenance, I can click on that, and I'm back into group maintenance. I can have some data half entered there, go back to categories, call my groups back up, and I've still got my data partially there. So it's a way of being able to go between multiple programs. The other way that I can go between multiple programs would be to call up my favorites menu, which is always available to me. And if I wanted to go to, say, my customer file maintenance now, because that's a favorite thing I want to do, from favorites menu, just click the button, and a new screen will open up with my customer maintenance functions in it. If you didn't want a new screen to open up, and by the way, now that this window is there, I can use these windows independently of each other. With Visage, you can have as many windows open as you like simultaneously. So if I minimize both of these and go back to that original icon to start Visage off, if I double click on that, you'll notice it takes me straight to a menu. Now the reason it takes me to the menu is because I've already logged on once. The system knows that I've logged on as Ross, so it doesn't bother to ask me for those credentials again. It assumes that I'm going to be logging on as Ross because that's what I've done, and I now have, on the bottom of my screen here, 3 totally separate windows that I can switch between by just clicking on the icon. So you can have as many windows open simultaneously as you like. If you use your favorites button, and if you, I'll just close this one down, if you didn't want the process to open in a new window, if you just wanted it to appear as one of these little bang bars like this, or an accordion, or if you've used Microsoft Outlook, that has a similar sort of interface associated with it. This little checkbox over here is supposed to represent the screen. Now, if you have that checked, then when you go and select something like favorites and we go to customer file again, rather than opening up in a brand new window, it opens in the same window and just adds another accordion type thing here. And that's the purpose of that checkbox that I said I'd explain later. Also, the other way I can go and access another program at any point, any time, in the middle of the program, whatever, is to use this quick access box. So I could go and pick one of these things at random. It doesn't really matter what it is, but let's get something reasonably useful, say an accounts receivable budget. I happen to know that because it's AR for accounts receivable, T for transaction, a budget entry screen, and once more that's opened up, it's taken me directly to the program, and it's within the context of the same window. If I remove that checkbox and use my quick access bar, and this time if I happen to know, because it's right here in front of me and you'll very quickly learn these codes, AR for accounts receivable, E for an inquiry, I happen to know that it's D for debtors accounts receivable inquiry, you'll notice that it's guessed what I'm actually after. So if you actually start to type in here as opposed to use the drop down, the system will continually refine what it is, and now because that checkbox isn't checked, if I now just hit enter to accept the name of that process, my new screen will open up in a brand new window. Right, and the window is always the right size for the screen, but I normally maximize those out myself. So that's how you can navigate through the system quickly and easily. And get access to as many related programs as you like. Now, as you saw, to get back to any of these at any point in time, I can just click on those. Alternatively, I can use the Windows icons down the bottom to switch between them as well, just from your normal taskbar. So, if I use my exit button here, that will exit or close the process that I'm actually in. And if you keep your eye on these little bang bars, you'll see the budget process will close and I'm back to my customer maintenance. And if I keep on hitting the exit button, it will take me back up through successive levels. Alternatively, if I wanted to get right back out to the menu, I'll just open up another couple of random processes here. I don't really care what they are. If you wanted to get back to the menu, a way to get out quickly from all of these processes, apart from going out once more and simply double clicking to open up the menu, but to get out of all of these is to come to the very top one, the one immediately below favorites. Just click on that and click exit, and it will then take you back out to the menu as well. And of course, I have my nice brassy tile menu sitting in front of me. In a broad sense, that's how you log on to Visage, how you move between menu items, how you can customize the your own favorites menu. And I should point out that you don't have to just put in individual programs. Something that you might be keenly interested in is getting access to, say, order entry, and I am interested in invoices, but not just invoices. I might be interested in everything on my invoices menu, all of these things. So out at this level, I can simply right click, add to favorites, and now I've got access to that entire menu. That's really what Visage is all about, I suppose. In a nutshell, it's just making your life easier. We've had a brief look at programs, how you can move around through those. We've looked at things like the right-click context menus, getting access to search and maintenance functions and so forth. I'll just leave you with another quick little tidbit. Here we have a table of information on the screen, which we've navigated through. One of the other nice things with Visage is whenever you're presented with a table of information, most likely, well, a couple of things you can do. You can sort these columns by simply clicking on any of the fields, which will sort the table by the field that you're clicking, either ascending or descending, and that's with a left click. If I use a right click, you also have an option to export data. And when you're exporting data, you can export it out to a tab delimited file, and you'd nominate a file name, or what you probably want to do with that table of information is put it out into Excel. So simply nominate Excel as your target, click OK, and my hard disk is rattling at the moment. It's firing up Excel, which is there, and as easily as that, that table of information has been exported out to Excel for me. Not necessarily exciting there, where we're talking about somewhat meaningless information, but if we went back to one of our other processes that we had before, that debtors inquiry, I might have been looking at this particular debtor. I might have had a list of my current transactions. Now this might be something that I do want to put in an Excel spreadsheet to send off to the customer. So the same sort of deal, right click, say I'd like to export data, put it out to an Excel spreadsheet, click OK, and once more my disk light is flashing as Excel fires up, and any second now, thinking, gotta love Excel. Come on, there we go. There's our information into Excel. which is a nice, easy, convenient method to be able to go and present any tabular information from Visage into Excel. Now obviously, I know you now may be starting to wonder about, gee, what are these apply buttons and so forth about, and go and all of these other great things, but that's for another day. The purpose of this was just to give you a quick introduction to how you can navigate, move around in Visage, and hopefully you're looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to showing you how Visage can help you save time and money in normal activities.